Today on the Dolby Institute podcast, we have an exclusive interview with two-time Academy Award-nominated cinematographer Phedon Papamichael to talk about Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. So Phedon and director James Mangold had some pretty big challenges on this film, updating the classic Indiana Jones look, shooting an extraordinary number of chase sequences, and using groundbreaking visual effects to make 80-year-old action star Harrison Ford look convincing as a much younger version of himself. Now, if you caught our previous conversation with Phedon about his Oscar-nominated work on the trial of the Chicago 7, then you already know how fun and candid he is to talk shop with. But don't take my word for it. Let's hear from the man himself. I wanted to take a step back though and kind of ask you about what was your first connection with Indiana Jones? Do you remember seeing Raiders for the first time?
Yeah, I do remember seeing Raiders. I was probably in high school in Germany. I believe I went and saw it in a theater and then loved it, American films, growing up in Europe, I mean, we had actually, because there was only 3 TV channels. I'm very old, and they were black and white. And, on Saturdays, it was a tradition. We would watch a John Ford Western or a Western, on Saturday night, and I was allowed. But all these kind of films were very special to us. And I remember Close Encounters in the theater, Jaws in the theater, all that. I'm from that generation where I actually saw it when it was released, and Indy is just an incredible character, and so much fun. And not ironically, but so many crew members came up to me, since we've been having been involved with this, they go, well, that's Raiders is a movie that made me want to be in the film industry, it's obviously, a great experience, great opportunity, and to carry on this, it's a historic franchise, and it's the last one, perhaps, with Harrison Ford. I won't speak for other people, but we're Harrison is just the most inspiring, fascinating person to work with. I mean, given his age, I'm also at advanced age, and I always complain about little pains and aches, and then I watch this guy, and it's just wow, I really should shut up. And just the fact, that he loves so much what he does, and Mangold said at Cannes, this was really came together with love. Everybody is just such a big fan of the franchise, of Harrison, and has so many historic and sentimental attachments to the whole series. So it's a lot of emotions in it, and a lot of expectations, and of course we want to pay tribute to it, and we, I'm, as my normal work is a bit, we do consider ourselves Hollywood filmmakers with Mangold and I. I mean, Ford versus Ferrari. I mean, I always say this. I mean, I have European background. I love Robbie Miller, and not necessarily influenced stylistically by classic Hollywood lighting, but I do think of myself as I am a Hollywood cinematographer. I mean, now I'm even a veteran, but it was a lot of fun, to look at Dougie's work and Douglas Solcom's work again, and be inspired and play with harder lights, atmospheric smoke, shafts of light, the colors, the more saturated colors, the warmth, the sun, all things that I typically try to be more subtle with. But to have an opportunity to really embrace it, and my very, very good friend, as you know, is Janusz Kaminski, and he's has broader strokes in general, but we go way back 35 years, and he was my gaffer at some point, and so we kind of started and learned together. And I asked him before the movie, I go, "How is it doing Indy?" And he goes, "It's the hardest movie I ever made." And I can elaborate, of course, a lot about that.
Because Janusz, he had obviously shot the fourth one for Spielberg.
Yeah, Chris Hogstall, yeah.
I'm really glad that you brought that up because, for me, obviously, our audience knows that the first three movies were shot by Douglas Slocum, and the images, especially in the First Raiders, are just iconic. So, what were the conversations between you and James you know, about making this fit sort of in the Indiana Jones universe? And you touched on this a little bit, but I'd love to hear more about like what's the approach to lighting to make this actually feel like an Indiana Jones film? And then obviously you kind of went in your own direction on some stuff as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's some classics, which is the silhouettes, the shadows, like so that requires harder light. And we were looking, from early on. He goes, we're keep thinking about where we're going to introduce, him putting on the hat for the first time. First time we see him, so we have in the prequel or flashback or opening sequence, which is during World War II, and he's de-aged, which we can talk about separately. But there's a moment where he turns around, puts his hat on, and I played like there's a red light going by on the outside. So I'm looking for like to hit that in addition to him revealing himself for the first time in the film with a hat, with a stylistic effect of like this red light, and it was effective because I saw it at the premiere at the Dolby Theater, and the audience applauded. Like it was noticed, and then we have it again later when he's in Morocco, and also him just stepping into little shafts of light, and especially that hotel where the auction takes place. Had a lot of opportunity to play with, that sort of classic Casablanca, but also, like Douglas lighting. And we did screen when I was in the DI with Skip Kimball at Company 3. We do, and I've done this before. I did it in Nebraska. I screened Paper Moon. I do, because I do want the film look. Of course, we ended up not shooting film, but I feel like we've been quite successful really accomplishing a film texture and film look. And we do vignettes, and I use the vintage glass, anamorphics, expanded C series, the way, the same basic glass that was used on the original. So, it helps all that. But I do think it's nice to project film in the DI, because I look at the contrast. I look at, because we forget, we've become so used to it then with digital projection, and just to remind ourselves, wow, look at the contrast, actually how little detail was in the blacks, and how, the latitude is just not nearly the same, which I like, so whenever people go, oh, there's a new camera out that has even like 20 stops, I go, I don't really want that. I want like 3 stops. I want it to be like my Kodak stock that I grew up on, and I want the things to burn out. And they go, the DIT goes, well, you're illegally. It's like, no, I go, it's okay. I don't want to see. I want it blown out, and I don't want to see more shadow detail. So anyway, but we do put that up, and we remind ourselves, that the film quality and the feeling you get from it. Of course, now it's mostly digital projectors, and in any case, so no matter what, even if you shoot on film, it's going to be viewed by the majority of people, probably by everyone, on a film, on a digital projection. So it's going through the DI process anyway. But it's very much something I try to approximate, and especially in the opening sequence, with Mangold, we always said when he's young, and let's really make it look like lost footage, like something maybe Spielberg shot and didn't use, or like was really try to embrace a lot of the classic visual elements of the original. Yeah.
I'm really glad that you said that, because when I watched it, I had that sense of like the extended flashback at the beginning in the World War II sequence did feel to me like a very classic. It felt like the first 3 movies to me. But then you get to New York in 1969, and I feel like you guys just went visually in a very different direction.
Well, we wanted that transition to be, he's now at his current age, and we knew it's going to be, quite a shocker and something that the audience has to like swallow. And we do it with a bang. It's like it's 68. It's like this New York apartment.
he's in his underwear and he gets up and walks right at camera.
He's in his underwear, and I go, Jim, people are gonna go when they see that. And actually, the reaction was like incredible. At least in my screening, I mean, it was like applaud. Like he gets up in his boxer shorts, he's pissed. He opens the window. It's a little brownstone in the village or wherever, and great grabs a baseball bat, and it's like that's an introduction that we always intended that transition. I mean, it's such a like visually, but also Indy now, like about to retire professor and grumpy and and about to get divorced and all these things. I don't know how many spoilers they usually don't like.
We're posting after the movie comes out, so
That was always the intent to. We talked about other films, like when we go to New York, we really wanted a different sort of grittier, which it ended up not really being, because it's still lush and it's still nice to play with the colors and the parade and all that. And then we shot Glasgow for New York, and it then ended up all being a sunny couple of weeks we shot there. So but it's still just by what's in the frame is so dramatically in contrast to the opening sequence, which is entirely night to dawn. And then you go into I think also indie mode, but definitely a big visual leap into a different palette and all that.
the New York sequences, I thought it was so beautiful. Just the your use of the strong side lighting and the high contrast. It's
Yeah,
just
I mean, I still did stylized, more aggressive lighting. And so that's why I'm saying it's still in the indie spirit. I'm not like, it's not natural, all soft and natural, and it's not Llewyn Davis or anything. So it definitely has like I mean, I have a tribute to Janusz in there. There's like when he's pouring his coffee and he pours some whiskey in it. And actually, I was at the screening and Janusz was sitting next to me. He was my +1 at the premiere, and I said, "This one's for you. This is a tribute to you. It's like this flair, and So I'm always, in this movie, I'm always looking and embracing, all those elements."
well, I too was at the premiere at the Dolby Theater
Oh,
in
great!
Los Angeles,
Oh, so
and
the reactions. I mean, that was great. I mean, of course, there were lots of fans dressed up.
there were a
So it
lot of
was a very
fedoras in the
yeah, it
audience.
was a very enthusiastic crowd. But it's great to see. I kept turning to Mangold, and because can we had a premiere. It's a different crowd. I'm not saying people don't like it, but it was nice to see every little thing. We were hoping like got its appropriate response and reaction. So it was fun to watch it with a lot of fans in the audience. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So but it's all in good fun and it's in good spirit. And you have to remember, it's Indiana Jones movie. I mean, you can't be too precious about it. It's all about and including his vulnerability and his the humor, and I mean, it's very difficult and challenging technically because it's continuous action. They're always on the move. They're running on a train. They're underwater. They're on a boat and an airplane. They're on a tuk-tuk. I mean, but still, and what is Mangold's specialty, same as Ford versus Ferrari. It's also, it's an action movie. It's a race car movie. The way in the car a lot, but it's always about connecting to the character, and that's our main goal. And dramatically, we always, none of this action works if you're not connected to the character. So we have to be there. We have to get all those indie moments. We have to communicate all the humor, and it's challenging because no one's ever sitting at a table and talking about anything. There's one scene I think in the movie where Phoebe Waller-Bridge and Harrison, when they first meet in the bar, and I think that's the only time we sort of have conventional or coverage. It's like every other thing is just out of control. So
I'm curious about something you were saying earlier. I wanted to ask you sort of about your experience in the DI suite, but When you said that, you were projecting and you were going for that film look. The other thing that I noticed definitely at the premiere was this movie looks stunning in Dolby Vision. Like the blacks are so like, especially that first, that first sequence, all at night. The blacks are so just like inky and delicious.
Yeah, inky is good because we always say we want the blacks inky, and Mangold, in not just on this, but his aesthetics lean towards, like, he's a photographer also. He works on his photos. They're always very saturated and contrasty. So that's where he naturally tends to want to go to anyway. And of course, in this case, even more so. And it's very tricky for us to go from, because he cuts his year like in editing, watching on a 60-inch OLED, so he's used to that contrast, the blacks, the richness, the luminance, and then you go on a screen, and we keep explaining to him this: we're in a different color space. You see, this is the edge of frame, that's as black as it gets. And I kept saying, but we also have in the room, we have a Dolby, we have a laser projector, so we can put it up. We also sometimes compare it to the OLED monitor. So it's, but he's so in love with that. So and in the screening, he turned around and he said to me, "This is the best I've seen it look ever," because we haven't actually. I wasn't there to supervise the laser pass, and to me actually it looked kind of too bright overall, because I just hadn't been used to seeing that much that much pop off of things. And I guess also, I mean, in a way, the blacks are inky and rich and black, but also, you do have more detail. You have more detail in the highlights, and so it's.
That's the other thing I kind of noticed as well. Like, and maybe this was unintentional on your part, but just the highlights also really just grabbed my attention too. There's that first sequence in Indy's apartment in the morning, and the
Yeah.
morning light is coming through. To me, it was just stunning and beautiful.
For contrasty lighting, it looks really great. Yeah. But again, I don't have that much experience because I've never actually been, we usually just do our regular, complete our color session, and then, it gets Skip does the Dolby passes and the HDR passes, and so but it was great to see it that way. And I do think this movie in particular plays really well.
For sure. Well, we thought it looked great. I'm very happy to hear that James thought it looked great as well.
Yeah. I mean, he said this is the best I've seen it. So
that's great. Well, tell me a little bit about.
And I know we tried to get him on, but yeah, it's true that he said that.
Tell me a little bit about the 1944 sequence. It's basically the first almost half hour of the film. Obviously, kind of the big conversation piece is that this was the sequence with the Harrison Ford and the de-aging process. So
Yeah.
how did that affect you in photography? Was there any special lighting considerations or shooting considerations that you had to factor in to accommodate the de-aging?
Well, initially, because look, we were all doing it for the first time, and this is ILM's, version of something that we were only familiar through deep fake or
deep fakes and AI, yeah.
So we didn't really know, and I go, well, how do we deal with this? And we had the 2 witness cameras, so we had like the 3 camera setup. Sometimes when I'm steady camming, I only needed 1 additional camera. We had like the little dots on his face, but initially when we started testing it, before the principal photography, I was presented with some concerns and restrictions, like if you can match the lighting maybe to existing lightings from other Raiders movies, it'll apply easier, it'll be more successful. I go, well, that's going to be tricky. Like, in every sequence I have to see, is there a sequence where he has a similar side light or a top light, it turned out that wasn't really a factor. We also didn't realize, like, the turnaround time ended up being pretty quick. not, of course, the final. They worked on the final for a long time, but we were getting results back within, a few days, I think maybe maximum a week, where we could, I mean, there was still a little square attached to it, but, we saw that, wow, this is really going to work. And we were all very impressed, and including Harrison. He was like, it's bizarre seeing yourself. So I didn't really have restrictions with lighting. I lit it the way I would have in a normal situation, and or the way I wanted to on the train. I mean, anyway, it's changing all the time, and I couldn't really. But the camera. I mean, the two witness cameras. Sometimes, I mean, we're in the train. It's narrow. It's stacked with stolen goods and boxes. It was. But again, then they were also fine doing it with one camera, but it was a little bit of a learning curve for all of us, including VFX supervisors and VFX producers, and then we also shot a lot of like scanning his face, and they just like wanted a lot of backup and a lot of just, I mean, I guess the more information, but the fact that there's so much footage of him shot in anamorphic over all of his years, like Mads Mikkelsen, who also got a little application. When he was young, he was only doing Danish television, and I think it was like PAL video. So, but the fact that for Harrison, I mean, it exists on film, and so many situations, different lighting situations, and that I guess that's when it's really helpful for them to have they can sort of take it from similar things. Don't ask me, because I don't really know how it's done, but I think basic, and what the big difference is that Harrison's acting out all these things. So all the close-ups, all his facial gestures, his speech delivery, all that is original. It's not like somebody's doing it and then you plant that. That, of course, is really great. That means also that the performance is intact, and it is Harrison acting. It's not like, it's not some computer generated thing. It's not some other actor with face replacement. It's Harrison acting it out. Of course, when it's something very physical and stuff, sometimes it's his stuntman Massa doing, but those are usually wider shots. But all the close-ups, everything is him performing every single scene.
You've done some big movies in the past, but just like we were alluding to, this is an extraordinarily VFX heavy film. You've got these huge action sequences. You got Harrison Ford on a horse riding through a subway tunnel. Like, tell me about your relationship with the VFX crew, and how do you sort of, I'm sure that's, that changes your trajectory of how you're working as a cinematographer.
Yeah, I mean, it is VFX heavy, but again, it's not like it's like a world that exists. Of course, it's augmented. We're replacing things. We're cleaning up things. We're adding things. But let me just say, you can go to every location on this movie and stand there if you're an Indy fan, and walk the street, or go on the beach in Sicily, or go to the temple, go to the cave entrance. All those are real locations. Of course, as you know, in the beach sequence and in the end, we're dealing with quite a few additions in the effects, and also sky replacements because there's a storm brewing. And so, it was very important for me to very, very closely work with Andrew, our VFX supervisor, and I made sure he's in my DIT tent, because I would constantly go, so listen, Andrew, I'm going to light this like it's sunny. Are we going to because it's overcast, but I'm going to make it sunny, because when we add the city of Syracuse in the background, we do want to, have sun on the building. So, it was very important to communicate and make sure that I understand what the final result will be. I mean, same in the DI, it was very tricky, because we started timing reels, we're timing the actors, but like we don't have final versions of the background. And I go, it's really difficult to do it, because it's all about balancing and contrast. And so it became very challenging, because although everything is shot on location, a lot of additional coverage was then shot on stage months later. And although the subway, for example, as you mentioned it, I mean, we built the entire subway. Adam Stockhausen built entire New York subway station. The train was functioning, could pull into the station. All these things were incredible. But, there's shots later that we needed Harrison close on the horse. I mean, he actually rides some of the stuff. It's just crazy. But it's finding the balance between what integrating close-ups. I think that's where like a volume stage or LED walls would really work for close coverage. And Greg Fraser was talking about it also. I mean, it's I did a whole movie recently that's all volume stage, but we didn't have a final content to play back on the walls. So even though like the airplane sequence with the Henkel bomber, we knew it's a storm, but I couldn't really use the LED walls because it was not the final version of the storm. But we fed in, so I'm still get some of the interactive light, like an approximation of what the final will be. But on the LED wall, it ended up being a glorified green screen. I would generate so we don't have to roto too much. But I still took advantage and had it a little bit as a lighting source. But most of my lighting is coming off my LED panels, my vortexes, and my sky panels. And I'm constantly riding them on this little DMX. It's a little portable wireless dimmer board, 12 channel. I have one. My gaff has one. And we have a script supervisor calling out the cues, approaching the vortex, breaking through, and we're like, okay, bring up all the maxi brutes, so it's like very much a live mix while we're watching the monitors in the DIT tent. And I got Andrew there, the VFX supervisor. I got my gaffer. I got headsets for operators. And I hear the script supervisor is on the plane, and she's calling out not just for us, but for the actors, so they can all react to what, in this case, the plane is going through. Is it rolling? Is it, going through what part of the storm? So it was a lot of fun and very challenging as well. And same with the tuk-tuk, second unit went ahead and shot a lot of the tuk-tuk chase sequence through Morocco, through the streets. They're down going this narrow alley that doesn't have direct sun. It makes a turn. It goes into full frontal sun. So, of course, all that is previs. Then we fill it in with the second unit shots. And then when we're doing the coverage of Harrison and Phoebe, I'm actually watching it playback, the sequence, what we have of the second unit shots, and then what is still left over for previs. And then with the live camera that we're now shooting on stage, and I have all the lights for every direction. And then someone's calling, like actually my DIT, Ben Appleton, is calling out, okay, they're making a left into front. And I'm like, shoot, channel 12 up, like full frontal, then, okay, they're going to go right into shade and like, so I'm like live reacting to it. It's like, I don't know, we're just making that stuff up. I mean, but like trying to, and it's great when you finally see it and you go, oh, that worked pretty well.
It works.
That worked pretty well because, we don't want to just do these little close-ups just for tiny little sections. Often it's coverage for a longer sequence that let's say goes 2 minutes in the edit. And we didn't want to interrupt the flow of the actors and all, them hanging on the tuk-tuk and trying to reach and throwing another guy off at, all that. Like we didn't want to break it up and to make it too fragmented for the performances as well.
You've touched on a lot of the sequences that I wanted to ask you about that I thought were just so visually arresting. But one of the sequences that I thought was just particularly striking, and I just love the look. It's again in the New York sequence. It's Indy and Helena in the archive, right when she sort of makes that first escape.
Stay where you are. Don't move.
Who are these people?
We need to get out of here.
Are they with you?
Not an inch, Miss Shaw. Miss Shaw, stop! Dr. Jones, it's over.
Who are you people? What do you want?
Stop!
Tell her to show! She's on the roof. Find another way up.
Dr. Jones! Dr. Jones, we're not gonna hurt you.
Tell us about that sequence and designing the look for the archive and what went into that sequence.
Well, those archives, I mean, again, that was an opportunity to pay tribute to, Janusz and Spielberg and Dougie. I mean, it was this beautiful set that Adam built. Again, it's on stage, and we had the tall windows and, try to play it moody. I put a lot of atmosphere, brought in the beams, and it was just one of those things that, that's a nice opportunity for some classic indie lighting. And, it seems like same in the lecture hall, it seems like lecture halls are part of typically the first act of a Indiana Jones movie. And that was also, a nice opportunity with the projection and him actually sliding that. That's no VFX. It's all him actually. It's practical. And the beam of light, whenever you can have beams of light and shafts and, it's just like always looking for that. We have some nice wide shots in the archive. Like high wide and also following them in that little hinge. I think it's, it just creates a lot of atmosphere and mystique and excitement.
Tell us a little bit about the prep process. I mean, I know you mentioned that you shot digitally, but I take it there was a lot of experimentation with lenses and sort of what were the major puzzle pieces that you had to solve during prep?
Well, since I discovered that I could expand anamorphics and cover the LF sensor, really on Ford vs Ferrari, because I really wanted anamorphic, but at the time it was super limited or non-existent, anamorphic with the characteristics to cover the large format, and that's when Dan Sasaki at Panavision had suggested, where he goes, well, I can expand it, make it where I go. But so Ford vs Ferrari was basically, they were kind of prototypes. Like when we went into week one, I mean, no one's ever done that, and they still were kind of flawed and all that, but looked great. The fact that it's large format, but still has the anamorphic lens characteristics. So I really enjoyed that look, and then have applied it on several features after that. Trial of the Chicago 7, I did something, basically LF with expanded anamorphics, different ones. And then, so in the 2 years since Ford vs Ferrari, it became quite popular. I guess a lot of people like that look. And then, so they've expanded quite a few. They've perfected them. They've done it on T series. So we actually the T series also on Indy, because they have great close focus capability, better than the C's. So and Jim really likes to be physically close often with the camera. It's not like we're on the techno crane hosing things down, and it's multiple cameras and also shooting a longer lens to cover at the same time. We're still very much, our approach is the way we would shoot any other film. There's one hero camera, that's the shot. If we can set another camera without getting in the way or interfering, we will obviously look for that opportunity. But we're very much about, being physically close with the camera, creating that intimacy, giving the audience a sense of connecting and being right there with them the same way we did in Ford vs Ferrari. So a lot of that applied to this genre. And therefore I went with the same concept and same, different lens package because of the T's. But I didn't really test that much because I just had really learned to use and appreciate it. And then it was an easy decision for me to go with that.
Well, one final question for you, Phedon. So we know you also direct. and we know you have a new film that you just that you finished, Light Falls, which we're all hoping to see maybe this fall. Tell us, before we let you go, sort of how does that feed you as an artist, photographing for other directors like James Mangold or Aaron Sorkin, and then making your own films?
Yeah, well, obviously, when people find out I direct as well, they always go, "Oh, what do you prefer?" I go like it's very much the same thing for me because I don't think of myself like I don't like to pigeonhole myself because I'm a filmmaker. I grew up as a photographer. Actually, my dad was a painter, but also production designer. I was wanted to be a painter, then still photographer. Then just because I could afford and take photos, I got into still photography. Then I go, oh, this is kind of boring. It's always by myself. Like I'd rather collaborate. Then I saw this movie Le Mépris, and I realized, oh wow, you can actually tell a story and still apply composition and then but move the camera also. So it was always just a natural development. And I wrote a script, at like the same age, like we're talking like 19 years old, 20, 22. I go, oh, then I can make a movie and with my photography. I mean, it's just kind of like, and when you talk to a lot of the old masters, like old Russian filmmakers, the guys who did I Am Cuba and The Cranes Are Flying, it's like when you say who are your great filmmakers, or in China they say this director and this cinematographer, like they're all considered filmmakers, and often they switch roles. Like the guy will shoot something for his, and the Mexicans currently, I mean Rodrigo Chiva, they can all direct, they can all shoot. I've directed commercials also for many decades, so to us, it's very natural going back and forth. I guess sometimes maybe there's a perception that, we're not so good with actors, but, I work as a cameraman because I also operated for so many years, my relationship to, Bruce Dern told me, I remember every operator I've ever worked with because that's the first human that when someone says cut, I look, that's the first eyes I make contact with. And he gives me a little thumbs up, or I can tell, I can tell by his expression. We have a special relationship, just like when I did Descendants with George Clooney, then he asked me to do the movie he directed because, there's like, we have a natural rapport because we are in that tiny little magic triangle where everything happens, the camera operator, the focus puller, the boom guy, and the director, ideally on an Apple box next to it, and the actors. That's really where the movie gets made. No matter what the scale is, no matter, there's 1,000 people supporting that magic triangle or 40 people, it still needs to happen. The magic still needs to happen there. So to me, it's very easy, and I like dealing with actors, and I love doing both. And it's not like I'm a frustrated cinematographer and I want to direct. I'm very happy often after I direct that I can go back to DP duties because there's a lot of other more unpleasant things that you have to deal with when you're a director producer, like financing, casting, distribution, sales. I do love editing also, and I think that's very helpful. Having spent, I've done 5-6 movies as a director. Spending so much time in the edit really makes you understand, what do you need, how to shoot a scene, how to cover a scene. And Mangold, of course, we're always talking about what is the shot before, what is this. We're very quick when we come up with coverage, but it's partially because I feel like I really also understand editing. I go like a move at this speed is not going to work. It's not going to play in this shot. A big slow crane move down, that's not going to be used in this portion of the scene. Like, where is the sweet spot where the crane is most likely, this move is most likely to be used, So that's very important to understand. It's not just about creating a beautiful, long tracking shot that is stunning in composition. If it's never going to be used that way, it's like then you're just disappointed and heartbroken, which a lot of young cinematographers are when they see their movie edited. They go, well, we had such a great wide shot. I'm like, well, you should have known they're not going to be on that wide shot when he's telling her, I love you, you know?
That's a great point. Phedon,
Yeah.
it's been such a pleasure to have you back on the show and talking with you again today. We really,
My pleasure, too.
I think this film is fantastic, and I can't
Oh,
wait.
great. Well, thank you. And I'm glad you enjoyed it, and we'll do it again.
If you haven't already, be sure to check out Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. It's playing now at a Dolby Cinema near you in glorious Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos. You can find links, as always, in our show notes. If you'd like even more conversations with artists and filmmakers about how they use technology to tell their stories, please be sure that you are subscribed to us, the Dolby Institute podcast. You can find links to our show on all the major podcasting platforms, including the video version on YouTube, in our show notes. Or you can just search for Dolby wherever you get your podcasts. If you're curious to know more about the Dolby Institute, head on over to dolbyinstitute.com. There you'll find information about all of our programs. You can access the entire library of episodes of this podcast, and you can sign up for our mailing list. Until next time, thanks again for joining us. This is the Dolby Institute podcast. I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. Our producer and editor is Michael Coleman. Our executive producers are Amanda Schneider and Jack Ferry, with additional editing by Matt Nixon. And our production coordinator is Sunny Chen. Thanks for watching.